Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Rosenberg. I'm Vice Dean for Education and Academic Affairs at the University of Minnesota Medical School. Welcome to the second edition of Mini Med School Evolving with the Pandemic. We are excited to have you here today, and we look forward to guiding you through our second topic in the series, Emotional Well-Being and Resilience in a Time of Anger and Burnout. The format is we'll begin with a moderated discussion and then follow that with a question and answer session. You can submit questions to our panelists at any time using the Q&A box, which can be found by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be available starting tomorrow on the Office of Academic Clinical Affairs YouTube channel. We will share the link to the recording with you by email. So today we have the pleasure of speaking with a panel of experts on ways to foster resilience, talking about the impact of the pandemic on children's social development, the social isolation of older adults, and caregiver resources that can be used. And now let me introduce our first panelist, Tai Mendenhall. Dr. Mendenhall is a medical family therapist and professor in the Couple and Family Therapy program in the Department of Family Social Science in the College of Education and Human Development. He works in collaborative family healthcare and community-based research focused on a variety of public health issues. Dr. Mendenhall, welcome. Can you talk about the realities of resilience in the face of burnout? What resources are available for people, and what are some of the best practices for individuals, couples, families, and society?
I love those questions, and I'll start by sharing my screen, and thank you for inviting me. Let's see, can everybody see that okay? Okay, so to begin with, I think that we need to recognize that we all have the insight that let's see, does that look better? Give me a heads up, or okay. So we all have insight that burnout or compassion fatigue is a broader or more complicated way of framing a lot of this, is a problem. I don't think we need to convince anybody. I mean, I think really across education, whether it's even in elementary ed, all the way up through high school, college, medical school, graduate school, this is on people's minds. And the statistics are alarming. I think in some ways they have been for a while. And in the context of the pandemic in the last few years, they've gotten worse. And pick a dependent variable, pick a bad outcome, and we're seeing increases in that, whether it's depression, anxiety, dissatisfaction with work, a sense of general overwhelm, insomnia, which can connect to all of those different things. It's there, and it's there across a lot of different groups and a lot of different types of symptoms or diagnoses. And I think that that call to action is a good thing, that these statistics are getting our attention more. They're increasing our conversations more. We're having one of those right now. But I will say, and this is the therapist hat coming on, that insight does not mean change. Just because you know something doesn't mean you're going to do something about it, and or that you're going to maintain something about it. I think anybody that has ever had a New Year's resolution knows what I'm talking about. If you go to a gym in January and you go to a gym in February, they're very different gyms, okay? And I think that one of the more engaging things that I've done with my students, with my residents at the university is to take out some of the sterile academic titles to some of this and say, how do we move from the insight to the action? And these are examples from my students, to say that it's better to prepare than it is to repair. If we're doing it right to begin with, and we don't have to fix it later. Practicing what we preach. I'll tell you, in medical school, that's a tough one. In residency, that's a tough one. We're running around around living on caffeine and candy bars post-call, drinking coffee like it's going out of style, and talking to our own patients about the importance of a balanced lifestyle, a good diet, date night. We don't do the very things that we tell our clients or our patients to do. One of my residents recently said, "Why am I working on the toilet?" Literally working on the toilet, doing work and home boundaries better. And I would say if you're working in the bathroom, you're probably not doing your boundaries so well. And that could certainly connect to burnout in contemporary times. Another one of my students said that she missed her kid's field goal. And she was at a game with her kid and kicked the field goal. Child's so excited, hopping up and down, looked over at her, and she's in her phone. She completely missed it. Contest and misery. I don't know if you've gotten into these. Somebody tells you about how horribly stressed they are, that they're doing this, and this, and their boss is doing this, and then they just got done with this. And the very first thing that somebody says in response, "Really, I have it worse. Let me tell you about my life," right? And it's like whoever's more unhappy wins. And I'm not sure that's a contest that I want to win, but I think that we hear that a lot of times in our narratives. And then we look for the panacea. We look for the fix-it-all. What's that one inspiring TED Talk that's going to change our lives? What's that one book that's going to make, everything different for us? And I think that one of the reasons that we're always seeing inspiring TED Talks and great books is because there is no one that works. If we had found the panacea, we wouldn't need any more inspiring TED Talks or inspiring books, to do this. And if you look around, they're there. I mean, these are examples, and I'm not saying that these are bad resources. I think for various people, any of these and all of these could help. We're certainly seeing the advent of apps. We're seeing really with our increasingly electronic world, a lot of these are helpful in our residency and a lot of the trauma work that I do. We have apps that are specifically set up for healthcare providers. You have apps that are specifically set up for parents. You have apps that are specifically set up for students. Any and all those can work. But again, there is no panacea. And when we look at the different resources that are available, our experience of the ones that are the most effective are the ones that frame us as systemic and complex creatures. And we know this. If you look at a lot of the research and the literature on biopsychosocial, or if you're willing to go there, biopsychosocial, spiritual complexities of people, is that integrated care, that collaborative care, those leaning into the complexity or the messiness to not only prepare, but to repair if or as we start to get in trouble, are more effective than putting all of your eggs in one basket. If you just take medication and hope that it'll work, it's not going to work better than if you take medication, go exercise at the gym, go to therapy, and see your friends. The more things you're doing, the better outcomes you're going to have. And so when we go across that biopsychosocial and even spiritual continuum, recognizing again that there is no magic bullet here. We work with students, we work with patients or clients, depending on which hat we're wearing with different days, is to do something and to think about something across all of those systems. Practicing good sleep hygiene, talk to anybody in healthcare and they know what it is. I don't think that they do it, but if you think about, Pavlov's dogs of associating a bell with food, are you associating your TV with your bed? Are you associating your phone with your bed? Are you associating tossing and turning because you can't sleep with your bed? These are bad associations. Get the TV out of the bedroom. If you can't sleep, get out of the bed. Practice what we preach with this, because if you're not sleeping well, nothing will go well. Okay. And then there's other examples across our physical selves. Exercise, think about your diet. Do the 5-4-3-2-1s or the 7-8s or the 4x4 breathing as you're relaxing and getting ready for bed. Do these different types of things that are good for your body alongside everything that's above the neck, although that's physical too. I mean, I think a lot of us will separate it and consider it to be different. But if or as you're looking at your psychological self, don't make a catastrophe out of struggling, versus trying to problem solve and figure out different ways to take care of you. And I think in this day and age where we define kids as plural kids, define kids, worth on their test scores, that our college students are more freaked out about, getting a 99% versus 100% on a test. Residency is no different. Faculty are no different. How many publications did I get this year? How am I doing on the way to tenure, whatever, is that we need to recognize that there's more to life than work. We need to recognize that there's more to life than school, and to have different things that are going on outside of work and school. That is good for us. And as we make time for that, as we prioritize these types of things along the way. And we have research to show that you're going to be mitigating or preventing even better a lot of the compassion fatigue or burnout that's along the way. Humans are social creatures if we keep going up that continua. And if your whole life is around what needs strategic versus
So I think we lost Dr. Mendenhall, and we'll bring him back. But why don't we move on? And I would like to now introduce Alyssa Meuwissen. And Dr. Meuwissen is a research associate in the Center for Early Education and Development in the Institute for Child Development. Her areas of interest include early childhood mental health, reflective practice, self-regulation, and social and emotional development. Dr. Meuwissen, welcome. And can you discuss ways COVID has impacted children's social development and how caregivers can help children adapt?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And I hope that this will maybe work out to be a kind of an interruption in Dr. Mendenhall's talk, because I think a lot of it actually is pretty similar.
Sorry, I'm back. I don't know what happened there.
That's okay. We'll come back to you later. So please go ahead, Dr.
Oh, deal.
Meuwissen.
I will wait. I don't know what happened to my internet. I apologize that it dropped.
No problem.
All right. So when we think about social development in children, we're talking about some skills that interacting with others, like sharing, sustained play, teamwork, collaboration. And we know that social skills for children are really important for learning and academic success, as well as for building meaningful relationships, which are important for relationships across the lifespan, which are really important for well-being. And so when we think about COVID's impact on children's social skills, it has really changed the environment that children were growing up in. It has given us a lot more time at home, a lot more time with our families, a lot more time online rather than doing things in person. And it's been this way for now 2 years. And that's, a fair chunk of children's childhood, especially if they're young children. The good news about children is that they're very adaptive to diverse situations. When we think about all of the contexts that children have grown up in across the globe, across history, our Western pre-COVID, like where, you have preschool and story hour and children's museums and places to be. And that hasn't always been how children have developed. And it's not the only way for children to develop competent social skills. So they've kind of adapted to this new context. And now as the pandemic recovering, we're asking them to readapt. And so while children are very adaptive, it is work to put them into different situations and to ask them to keep adapting. And so it's something that we all have to be aware of, that it is asking a lot for kids to have kind of lived in one context. And again, especially young kids, that's kind of all they've ever known. And now we're going to ask them to live in sort of a different context. When we talk about children's resilience, children have a drive for positive development. They kind of naturally, internally, recover skills, they build skills. It's something they're very internally motivated to do. But Dr. Bruce Perry made the comparison that children are not like a Nerf ball, where if you just squish them, they're going to just bounce back into the exact same shape. They're more like a metal hanger where you can bend them and you can bend them differently, but they're never going to get exactly back to where they were. And so when we say that children are very resilient, it doesn't mean that what happens to them doesn't matter. It just means that everything that happens next is going to matter too. So it's not that one thing has, kind of become destiny. Children are always growing, they're always changing. But COVID has impacted children, and it's impacted, the context that they're living in. So I see that COVID has had two main impacts on social development. The first one being reduction in peer interaction. And so as we've talked about, kids weren't going to school for a long time. They weren't going to childcare, preschool, after school activities have been canceled, things like that. And it's reduced children's opportunity to practice being in relationships with other children. And social skills take practice. It's not just that like at 3 years old, you can be a competent sharer, and at 5 years old, you can, have sustained friendships. It's much more about what experiences you've had rather than just the age you are. And children's brains are naturally egocentric, which means that they put themselves first. They attribute a lot of causation to their own actions, and it's hard for them to think about kind of themselves as a small part of a bigger picture. It's effortful for children to be socially competent. It's effortful for adults to be socially competent too. And I think with a lot of working from home and people's job situations, we've realized how effortful it is. But for children, that really is the case. The good thing about this reduction in peer interactions is that there's not one critical window for learning how to make friends or have friends. Friendships really change across all of childhood. Again, we make a lot of new friends in college. It's very different than making adult friendships. So social skills are really complex, and children can keep learning them all throughout their lifespan. But we can think about if children have missed out on some practice for social interactions, or they've had to readjust to like going back to school in person when they haven't done that for a while. What are things that caregivers can do to make these transitions a little more easier, to help children kind of build those skills that they might have been missing out on? And so I think we can really think about the foundational underlying skills that make up social interactions. And one of those is being able to communicate what you're thinking and what you're feeling, especially. So building children's vocabulary, just general, is helpful for them to be able to express, to work things out with other kids, and then especially vocabulary around emotion. And children have complex emotions. And sometimes we want to think that children's emotions are very simple, or even that like, oh, if we just don't talk about, the bad, hard things, they just won't think about them. But children actually have a lot of similar emotions. They can have multiple emotions at the same time. And so being able to give children those language of what's the difference between anger and frustration and sadness and disappointment and things like that, so that children are able to communicate that. Another basic skill is theory of mind. And that is an idea where children are able to take the perspectives of someone else and understand that what someone else thinks or feels is different than what themselves is going on in your own head. And this greatly develops between the age of 3 and 5. But again, it's something that actually things like compromising and teaching someone else a skill, all those things rely on, fairly highly developed theory of mind. And so we can talk to kids about the connections between feelings and behaviors, and that if someone feels some way, they might act a certain way, or if someone's acting a way, that might give you hints about what they're feeling. And we can talk about this with pets and babies and people who don't even have words, and we can point out instances where I don't feel the same way that you do, and how might we communicate and understand each other even if we're not on the same page. A third skill is self-regulation. So we've talked about the importance of communicating emotions, and interactions with peers are very emotional. They can be frustrating, they can be really exciting, they can be crushingly disappointing. And all of that is kind of a normal part of peer interactions. And so to normalize having big emotions, and then also have strategies for dealing with those big emotions. Mindfulness activities that we can do with kids, simple things about breathing, counting, doing jumping jacks, giving yourself a hug, things to help children feel more calm. Again, especially when they're in situations in big groups of children, it's overstimulating, it can be loud, to give children tools to help themselves regulate their own emotions. And then finally, knowledge of social expectations is another big part that I think is just going to take practice. And so what do you do when you first meet someone? How can you ask to play if you want to play with these kids? What do you do when you disagree and you don't want to play the same thing? How can you continue still being in relationship with that person? And pretend play is a really good way to kind of dress rehearsal this. You can do it with, whatever toys kids like to play with. Books are really helpful for thinking about, right, how did they work that out? Why didn't that go well from the beginning? Even TV, we know kids have been spending more time on screens, but we can use that intentionally. There's a lot of shows that really do play out social dilemmas and emotion regulation and give kids strategies. And so we can use our books and TV intentionally to build social skills. So reduction in peer interaction, I think, is a problem that's been, high on people's minds. And I think it's something that's going to take structuring and coaching and intentional practice. But I think there's a lot of potential for children to regain, the social skills and opportunities that they didn't have for a couple of years, and to still be able to go on and build those lifelong friendships. The other major impact I've seen on COVID is the increased stress on families. And this is probably kind of, in my mind, a bigger problem for children's social development. Everyone has lived through this same kind of pandemic, but there's been a very wide variety of what actually people have experienced. And a lot of this has been influenced by the privilege that families have. And some children have experienced really large stressors like loss of a caregiver, loss of housing, parent loss of job, food insecurity, civil unrest, natural disasters. These kinds of major stresses in children's lives are going to impact their mental health and their emotional and social skills. And we know from research that uncertainty, disrupted routines, family stress, parent mental health, these things that have come along with the pandemic do impact even the youngest children. And toxic stress is a word that we use when we think about these kind of big events that have happened to children that were too much, too long, or didn't have the right buffering. They didn't have a strategy to deal with that stress. And those do impact children's physiology, their hormones, and certainly their self-regulation. The pandemic, we know, has been associated with increases in children's problem behavior, depression, and anxiety. And also racial inequities have widened during the pandemic. We know that some communities specifically have not been getting the support that they need. And I think that COVID's most significant threat to children's development in general is the disrupting of nurturing relationships between children and caregivers. So when we think about children dealing with stress, the number one most important thing is that they have a supportive, nurturing adult who can process things with them, who they feel safe with, who they feel taken care of. And having relationships like that buffer children from the negative impacts of stressful or traumatic events. And this pandemic, unfortunately, has impacted adults a lot. And adults in a lot of different situations have not been able to be as regulated themselves, which really impacts their ability to regulate other children, and they haven't been able to be attentive. And again, there's been a lot of different experiences. Some parents have been home with their kids trying to work remotely. Some parents have not been able to home. They've been essential workers and they have to send their kids off to, childcare that maybe feels physically unsafe. And so in a lot of different ways, it's placed a lot of stress on parents. And it especially matters if parents were already struggling. Those families are going to have the biggest impact from this COVID disruption. So supporting caregivers is one thing we can do. And I think building those relationships between parents and children in COVID, as I talked about, children are really egocentric and they tend to believe that they had a bigger role in, for example, parents being stressed or bad things happening or someone losing a job. And so to give children narratives and language about, we've experienced these stressful things, these big things. This is why we still love you. We're still here from you. And that it's not because of something the child did that these bigger things have been happening in the world. And so to be able to talk to children clearly at an appropriate level. And for parents themselves, there's this idea of good enough parenting that, if you freaked out and yelled at your kid and stormed out of that room one time, it doesn't mean that you've damaged them. It's a chance for repair. It's like, let's talk about that. That didn't go how I wanted it to. I got really angry. This is why. This is what I hope I can do to feel better. And doing that modeling can really actually be helpful for children to see everyone has big emotions, everyone needs, support, and that it's a normal part of being in relationship with other people. And also just kind of giving the sense that we're a family and together we can do hard things, and not trying to sugarcoat everything of it's all great and, it's fine and nothing's wrong, but to be able to talk to children about how do we get through these things together. And so, there are things that parents can do with their kids like that. I also think that looking at this systemically is very important, because it's not really the burden isn't on parents to just, if you just talk to your kids, everything's going to be easy and great. The parent mental health, policies and programs that ensure basic needs are met. Like, these are the things that really cause stress and really provide barriers for parents to create those nurturing relationships with their children. And so I think it's the access to mental health care, substance use care, and programs that support basic needs that are going to be one of the most important ways we can impact children's development, is by supporting the parents so that they can have that bandwidth, the emotional bandwidth, to emotionally connect with their children. And adults outside of the home are also really important. And that's been another impact of COVID, is that children haven't had as much experience with teachers and coaches and mentors. And especially if the family is stressful, having that kind of network of caring adults can be really important for children's positive social and emotional development. And so we also should be really intentional about supporting those systems. We know that teachers and childcare providers have also been really stressed by the pandemic, but that also is negatively impacting children's development. And so providing the staffing and the time, the training and resources to those systems, so that everyone who cares for children is able to intentionally support development and make time for that, I think is going to be really important. So I've been parenting 2 young children throughout this pandemic. And once, when we were walking around the block in early 2020, because there was nowhere to go, the playgrounds were all closed, my then 2-year-old just starts kind of like marching around, and she looks at me and said, "Mom, did you know that I can dance even when there's no music?" And of course, I knew you could dance with no music, but it was a really powerful metaphor for me about, like, our kids can do so much with very little. And, you know, they can adapt to so much. And if we are able to build systems and provide parents with social support and provide the teachers and this whole community, it really takes a village. And I think our village was impacted by COVID a lot. But if we can get back to that, then I think children have such great potential to learn these social skills, to develop meaningful relationships with whatever they've been given, and that they have so much hope and so much more growing to do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meuwissen. I'm going to bring back Dr. Mendenhall to finish his formal remarks about resilience in the time of burnout. And Dr. Mendenhall, thank you for showing resilience in recovering from your internet break.
Yeah, so, I have no idea. It hasn't done that for like ever. So, it's a Murphy's Law thing, and I apologize. So yeah, and actually I was almost done. Let's see, display, there we go, swap. So, and we're building off of each other. I'm liking this conversation because in our partners and our family, it's so easy to take the people that mean the most to us for granted. And we really need to prioritize them. It's easy to prioritize work. It's easy to prioritize school. And then have family kind of fit in around the edges. And in many regards, if you're not purposeful about that family time, the family walk around the block, that we were just hearing about, that's beautiful, because if you didn't prioritize it, I doubt it would happen. I mean, there'd be one more school assignment to get through, one more, email to get through, etc. And if, as we do that with our friends, with our families, I think that, and we have research to show that our resilience for this is all going to go better. Biopsychosocial spiritual, to the extent that it's meaningful to you, and in different ways it is to many people, whether it's engagement in a faith community, personal spiritual practices at home or as a couple or as a family, are always and also connected to different resilience at a baseline, prepare, and as an adaptive response to any type of stressors. And so closing, like I had said, there is no magic bullet. There's no panacea. And in fact, the more things you do, the better. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Be careful about doing the opposite. Like I'm a couch potato and I weigh 300 pounds, and then January hits, so now I'm going to work out 7 days a week and eat lettuce. I mean, that isn't going to work either. So figure out that sweet spot. As parents and kids, as couples, talk to each other about what's good enough. A family meal, for example, maybe you can pull it off 2 days a week. That's better than no days a week. And then as you evaluate kind of your to-do list and kind of compartmentalize, okay, I'm going to be at work, or I'm going to be at school, now I'm at home, and then be at home, and everything that means. I think that we all, whether it's parents, children, colleagues at work, students, whatever role or whatever hat we're wearing, are going to be better for it. So that was the last part before my internet died. And I'll go ahead and wind up now.
Thank you, Dr. Mendenhall. It's my pleasure to bring in our third panelist, Robyn Birkeland. And Dr. Birkeland is a study counselor who collaborates with family members, typically adult children or spouses, guiding them through the transition process of moving a family member into long-term care. Dr. Birkeland, welcome. And can you talk about the impact of COVID on older adults in relationship to social isolation, and also bring in information about caregiver resources?
Absolutely. I'm going to share my screen real quick here so that everyone can see my slides. So we don't need those, are all official, but we don't need them. I'm going to talk about the impact on COVID on older adults, but I'd like to put it in a little context because I think it was a very different experience, and it's kind of hard to know which phrase, but a lot of what I'll talk about it is kind of what I've spoken with families about during more of the hardcore lockdown phase and their experiences then. We have to kind of put in the context of this. From the beginning, we've known this is a disease that had more severe impact on older adults, whether it be more serious illness or a higher death rate. So if you're thinking about that as a member of the older adult community, or if you're thinking about it as someone looking at the older adult community, you're thinking, well, we got to protect them. They're a vulnerable population. We don't want anything bad to happen to them. And they're maybe thinking themselves, we're fragile is the word I have on the screen here, but just kind of that, I don't want to get this because I could die from this. This is very scary. It's very anxiety provoking. Feels like they're targeted. And we did do some things, to kind of make a difference as a society of like having like shopping hours that were only for older adults. And that's it's fantastic. On the flip side of that, as a society that really kind of values independence and places a lot of, importance on, like doing for yourself, and that's a strength. If you are now kind of under this lens of, we have to be protected and we have to have our special store hours, we can't go, it can make you feel very anxious, very us and the rest of the world. And so, there's that context there, but beyond that, there's also this piece of we then treated people differently. And not just younger groups treating older groups, but even within the older adult population, there was like, well, you know what, we're not going to do family visits. We're not going to do book club anymore. We're not going to there. And again, that you can say that is something that we kind of all did. But if you think about a lot of our older adults, they may be living just with their spouse or partner, or they may be living alone. Those family visits, those friend gatherings were a big, big part of their life. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but it's really like part of their identity. So you have this context of being very scared that they may, something very tragic may happen, and not being able to do their family visits, their friend gatherings that mean so much to them. Not going out as often, for sure. You have this piece of, we all kind of started using videos and FaceTime and phones more. And for a lot of older adults, that was completely fine. It's not out of their wheelhouse, but for some, it really was. And when I talk about individuals with memory loss, that's phone is very difficult. Video chats can be difficult as well. I'll get into that a little bit more, but it's just not necessarily the preferred way of going about things. And again, just to highlight, some of these older adults were living alone. So they had basically no social interaction, which it has a lot, I will get to this too, but there's a lot of implications with that. I want to highlight a few things though. We're not talking with social isolation, we're not talking just about loneliness and about being alone. Again, there's a sense of identity that comes with, especially for older adults, family. Like being, like when you were talking, Alyssa, about mentors and coaches, and I was thinking grandparents too, like they suddenly were not part of their grandchildren's lives. And so that means a lot, like that identity of having big family dinners and gatherings and all that, not being able to have that it's not just like, oh, I'm missing out on something I like to do. This is my identity. I think of myself as the matriarch or patriarch of this family, and this is what we do. And I provide care for my grandkids. Now I can't. The sense of community that they, whether it be support groups for caregivers, adult day programs for individuals, especially with memory loss, who need that extra support, that was gone. Church, that's a huge part of identity for a lot of older adults. And now churches are all online, and that just felt different. And like I said, the respite care of having those support groups as well. Also special occasions I wanted to highlight too, because I think for a lot of people over time, we started to get more comfortable with taking some risk and going to weddings. But for a lot of our older adults, it's like, well, the family's going to this wedding, but grandma and grandpa are not going to be able to attend. So they were missing out on these momentous occasions, funerals, not being able to go to funerals of friends, planning for, I have a lot of people that I speak to that whose spouse partner had died or parent, and they weren't able to go to or they didn't have a funeral until much later. And so you have this weird sense of not being able to, not necessarily have closure, but not being able to have this rite of passage that we have as a society as for funerals for loved ones. So it was big events like that. And I also want to highlight the fact that this is for a group of people who are prone to social isolation because of many life transitions that may have occurred. So this is around the time where people are retiring from work. They're moving to a different location for retirement. I had a few that moved to senior communities right at the time of COVID, and then all the group activities there shut down. Everything that they were moving there to be a part of, suddenly they're in their room and they can't meet anyone. And so it absolutely backfired for that point in time. But so moving, driving retirement, so they're not getting around as much, physical issues, health issues, immobility, maybe the loss of a partner or spouse, or taking on the caregiving role. Any of those transitions can come with that age, and then to not have that extra social support, it's that much more difficult. And something I want everyone to kind of be thinking about as we're talking about this is this kind of equation that we have about safety and risk, and how we have to have this balance, but how that impacts quality of life. And if you're really, really safe, then you're not doing risky things, but that might really impact your quality of life. So just be kind of thinking about that. And I don't have an answer for how to set up that equation. I think that's all personal for each person. But for being socially isolated, it's like what was the impact of risk? And this slide just shows how impactful social isolation can be. If you're socially engaged, you're going to have better health outcomes. Your psychological well-being is better. You're looking at increased cognitive functioning. And it's not just that being socially engaged gives these positives and not being socially engaged would be neutral. It's actually negative. So if you are experiencing social isolation and loneliness, you're more likely to have negative impacts on your health and quality of life. And in fact, for health risks, being socially isolated is comparable to the same health risks of being a smoker. So it is, very, very impactful. Speaking specifically to caregivers, so I kind of broke this up into the idea caregivers at home and caregivers of individuals who are in residential care, specifically for memory issues, but this could also apply to a lot of people in nursing homes as well. So at home, you have caregivers whose schedule and life and routine has completely changed. So just this complete upheaval of how it were. So you have someone who maybe working from home and has to figure out how to do that by 24/7 care. Someone who probably, or maybe not probably, but might not understand why they can't go anywhere, why no coming over. You have the fact that nobody is over. You don't have that respite. You don't have that chance to kind of have a break from caregiving. It's absolutely 100% of the time. And you have to worry about, well, what if I get sick? Who's going to take care? How am I going to isolate here? What if they get sick? How do I help them? And so it was very, very stressful. I'll jump to the third bullet point there. Not all bad, because I do have to stress that some of the people I spoke with were they saw the silver lining was, well, we're having more time together. These are people that were able to work from home, and they were able to have more time with their partner. They were able to be there and still be able to maintain their financial, because if they hadn't been able to work from home, who knows what would have happened for the caregiving, but also, if they would have had to have quit their job, then then you have a financial strain, which obviously is something across the board that everyone was worried about. For residential care, I always think of one of the participants from one of our research studies was saying, it's like, when you move your loved one into long-term care, you don't expect that you will never be able to see them again. And that's essentially the situation for a long time with residential care. No one knew when visits were going to open back up. No one was able to visit. And so you've moved your loved one into long-term care, and now you can't see them at all. And, this is long-term, this is like end of life for a lot of people. And so, it's not time you're getting back. It's not time you're getting back. And it's time that you are not able to spend at the end of someone's life with them. So it was very, very difficult. I heard people talk about the unfairness of staff being able to come in and out, and why couldn't they as family also, if they were following the rules, why couldn't they, get in and see their loved one? As I said, with the phones, that didn't work out real well, because people with memory loss, it's a hard time. It's a very complicated process using a phone, because you have this disembodied voice and you have to make sense of what's being said and process that and come up with an expression or express it. And so it was a lot. In the video chats, you needed someone there a lot of times, the staff there, and there weren't a lot of staff around. The residents weren't able to meet with each other. They were all, it was really tough. And you couldn't go in and monitor care. So you didn't know, like, how is my loved one being treated here? Do they need new socks? Have they run out? Like, there was so much about it that was so difficult. And again, it comes back to that equation. For a lot of people, they wanted the choice. Like, I want to be able to see my loved one. I don't, I will take that risk because I want to see. But for others, it's like, I don't want to bring that. I don't want to worry that I have brought in, COVID to a nursing home. I don't want to do that. So there's definitely a lot of layers to that. But a caregiver talk would not be complete if I didn't have a slide about caregiver resources and the importance of self-care. You really, really, you can't take care of somebody else unless you're able to take care of yourself too. So give yourself permission to prioritize your self-care and to give yourself that time to take care of you. Staying engaged and active is so important for all ages. For older adults, particularly, it has a real impact on quality of life. And so I just have a few ideas that, like arts, participating or viewing arts, going for walks, rec centers, senior centers, civic organizations and groups, clubs, adult day, like anything you can do to kind of be engaged. And a lot of these places have things online, not as good as being in person, for people who want that real social, in-person engagement. But there definitely are a lot of things out there, and a lot of these activities have opened up. And then just a screen of caregiver resources. The first two is an information that the program is sending out. Specific to Minnesota is the Senior Linkage Line, which has a ton of resources. Area agencies on aging are all around the country. It's a federal program. and they will know everything in your area. So you'll have a local area agency on aging that will tell you all sorts of great resources. Alzheimer's Association. We have a conference for caregivers, professional and family caregivers, very non-academic conference. So it's really great for just anyone who wants to learn more about caregiving for people with memory loss. And that is on June 4th. And that, yeah, so those are my slides. Sorry, having to rush through, but I wanted to make sure I got it all in.
Thank you, Dr. Birkeland. So let's move on to questions submitted by our attendees, and thank you, attendees, for submitting your questions. If you want to submit a question, please use the Q&A box, which is found by clicking the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So let me start off with Dr. Mendenhall. Since compassion fatigue has always been a problem, there should be some sort of way to integrate this into education. Can you talk a little bit about how compassion fatigue, especially, the question asked about medical school, but really for all healthcare, provider learners, what can be done to introduce more stress reducing topics, or, boost, people's skills in well-being and avoiding compassion fatigue?
Well, that's a great question. I think entire dissertations or careers could be built on that. I think that one of the first steps is to recognize it and talk about it. I think that that can open up, and I've seen it open up a variety of different things that are creative responses that aren't done in a top-down provider consumer service delivery way, that I, as your boss, I'm going to do this for you, now get better, that I, as your professor, I'm going to do this. But we've created, for example, integrating families into orientation sequences with new residents, because families are oftentimes waiting around for the scraps of residents' time and attention. So including them along the way. With grad students, having open time in forums where the faculty get out of the way and they're able to support each other, student to student, because they have a lived experience and wisdom that professors are not able to offer in the same way. Integrated into undergrad classes and conversations in the same ways. My wife is an elementary school teacher, so I'm going across the continuum here. There's a variety of different ways that teachers support each other and that students support each other through arts and through conversation arts, theater arts, visual arts, conversations. And having even a resource list, like in one of the classes that I'm teaching, we have an ongoing thing on our Canvas site where students are always putting in different things for other students to look at and share. Again, I don't think there's one way, but I think that it starts with having a conversation and making something that's covert, that everybody knows is there, but it's not really visible, overt, and then we can do something about it.
Great, thank you. Dr. Meuwissen, are there culture-specific ways for families to connect or communicate with young children?
That's a very broad question. And I mean, yes, in short. And I think there's so much room for any family to do it in a way that feels natural and normal to them. And I think to communicate with your children, the important thing is that it's working for both people, and so if parents are feeling like they're getting advice to, use books or, sit down in a certain way, or the child, or you feel like you're doing it one way and the child just isn't responding, there's no one right way to talk to your kids. And so you can do it while walking, you can do it while driving so that you're not staring them in the face if that's not working for you. You can use stories about your life or things that, your parents talk to you about. And so I do think it's important not to, necessarily like the parenting books that I have to say it like this, and so that's how you have to say it, but to it takes a little more intention, but to really think about what works for me, what works for my kid, and how can I talk to my kid or have these important conversations in a way that makes sense for us and isn't necessarily just the cookie cutter advice.
Great, thank you. Dr. Birkeland, I'm going to turn to you for this next question. And the questioner asks, how can we give support to an older adult in our family who has lost their spouse? And gives the example that their two grandmothers lost their husbands during COVID. I'm so sorry about that. And one grandpa was a main caregiver for my grandma who's struggling with the early stages of dementia.
Yeah, I think, if you live local, I would say it'd be great. As much as you can check in would be fantastic. If you don't, obviously checking in, via phone or video chat, or emails or writing letters, that would be great to kind of have that sense of a feeling of family. If you know their friends, to get their friends kind of to rally around them as well. If you're looking for support group, there's some great grief support groups. And I don't know if you're local to Minnesota or not, but I'm sure everywhere there are great grief support groups. So if you Google that, you'll find a lot of different options for that as well. For the grandmother who is experiencing memory loss, I think there's more to that. You could think about maybe getting a home health companion or a senior companion to be with them, depending on what their needs are. There are some, like Lutheran Social Services has a program where someone can just come by, just like to hang out for a couple hours and just kind of check in and things. So it doesn't have to be somebody who's there on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be that intense, but checking in with their neighbors to like have an open line of communication with them so that they can, let you know if things, they're noticing that things are wrong, or they can kind of check on them as well. I think there's some great senior groups out there, senior centers that offer a lot of resources too, as far as things for them to do, and a lot of companionship opportunities that would be able to kind of help with some of those. You're missing somebody who was there with you all the time, and so you're looking to fill that social void, as well as looking for like that support for the grief. So I would definitely look to both of those, and for the caregiving, if you need more assistance. But I don't know if you were speaking to, like, now she needs more care because her primary caregiver has gone, or if you were meant that, this is just a grief situation. So I don't know exactly how to answer that. Hopefully what I've said has answered it well enough, but yeah, you can always email me if you want more information.
Thank you. Let's move on to a few more questions in the last few minutes, and I'll ask our panelists to be brief in their answers so we can get as many of these in as we can. Dr. Mendenhall, how can people with limited resources, or those dealing with systematic or societal injustices, practice self-care?
Wow, I love that question too, and I don't know if there's a single or an easy answer. Some of the things that come up to me is, a lot of physicians will say, "Hey, eat healthy," but then patients can't afford the healthy foods, or they'll say, "Hey, join a gym," and patients can't afford, the gym memberships. But all year round, every single mall in town opens early and stays up late. They're great places to just do laps and to exercise. I have a number of my patients that'll do it in groups, and so it's social with them. You can people watch. It's kind of like the state fair every time you go to the Mall of America that way. Farmers markets, talking with each other, sharing lived experience and wisdom about how to navigate some of these things that maybe a physician or maybe a professor or maybe a therapist isn't necessarily as familiar with. And at the same time, again, people need people. People are connecting with each other and supporting each other along the way, instead of somebody with a whole bunch of letters at the end of their name trying to solve a problem for somebody that is in a context that maybe that provider is less familiar with. And I think if we flatten hierarchies out that way, we do better work.
Thank you. Dr. Meuwissen, as the pandemic begins to slow down, how can we balance socializing our children and keeping the family time we've gotten over the past 2 years?
Yeah, I think that's a really, I don't know, so a sweet question of, I think so many people have found that they've gotten more time to spend with their kids, and that's not, a bad thing. And I think we have to be a little creative, and kids' schedules we know are going to fill back up. So one thing is just to be intentional about, like, do we have to sign our kids up for every single opportunity possible, to be a little bit selective, but that can be really hard, especially with the age of kids. And we know that as children grow, they're driven to spend more and more time with your peers. That's part of the developmental process. But I think, maybe instead of having Friday family night movie nights, we have Saturday morning, like maybe if, weeknights are filling up, we still can carve out some time of day, or once a week or once a month, right? Make it a family date night instead of just a romantic relationships. But I think there are ways, and I think we might be surprised that our kids want that too. They have such a push to be with peers and to stay connected. But I think in a lot of cases, they want close relationships with their families as well. So I think if you be creative and talk to your kids, what's going to work for you? What's going to work for me? Don't assume that, right, you can just kind of declare you must spend this time with me, but find something that works for your family. And I think it's an important thing to prioritize.
Thank you. And this will be the last question. Dr. Birkeland, can you talk about how you recognize signs of social isolation?
Yeah, so I think it depends a little bit on personality, because if somebody is not necessarily an extrovert and hasn't always done a whole lot of things, then you shouldn't be necessarily concerned if they're also not doing a whole lot of things now. So make sure you're looking at them with an objective lens and not on a lens of like, oh, I would have been going out doing a whole lot. Because if that's not the personality, then they're not going to do that. So it's not an issue. But look for, talk to them, like, what did you do this week? And kind of get an idea of who they talk to, what activities they engage in. And if you're seeing like that they're not doing a whole lot, I mean, it's just as easy as kind of looking at it and saying, hey, I looked at, like, we talked about your week and you haven't really done much. Let me see if I can schedule some time to do some things with you. Or do you want me to go to this event with you? Or, try to kind of stir up some interest in some things and move on from there, call their friends. May need to take more of an active role, but yeah.
Great, thank you. And with that, we need to close this session, but a huge thank you to all our panelists for your time and sharing your insights into how we collectively deal with the range of emotions in this pandemic. And especially thank you, all the audience members, for participating in today's session and for asking such great questions. And I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. So next week will be the third and final mini medical school session, and it will focus on the long view, envisioning a healthier world, which will discuss long COVID and ways of reimagining health and society post-pandemic. It will happen same day, same time, so next Wednesday from 12 to 1 o'clock. So thank you all very much. And with that, we'll close this session of Mini Medical School.